obviously at the corner of 24th and 2nd Avenue. Next slide. In looking at the existing conditions as landscape and urban designers, we look for a bunch of cues as to what is working well and what is not working well. The trees in this North Plaza are doing quite well, especially compared to some of the other trees in the plaza, parts of the complex. So they became a primary feature that wanted to be preserved, enhanced, and developed. But the pavement around these trees is in constant battle with the roots of the trees, creating problems for the trees, obviously, but also problems for residents as they try to make their way through the area without falling on an uneven surface. We also noted that the original benches that were placed in this area, and this was also mentioned in the surveys, are not oriented to in a sort of friendly, collective way. They're just seats, but they face opposite each other. It's a sort of strange arrangement. So we wanted to work on that. Next. The main amphitheater, which used to be a water feature, which was closed because of problems with the water coming into the garage, really is a massive piece of concrete, which is a huge heat sink. It's sort of interesting form, but with the loss of the water feature, it has less of a purpose. It also has a major impact on sightlines through the plaza, and in some ways restricts the usable area of the plaza. And an important part of the sightline is a big part of it. It creates these dark sort of screened areas, even kind of dark in the daytime. The other issue with the South Plaza is the trees, which were planted at the same time as the trees in the North Plaza, and they're like bonsai trees by comparison. And they are not in good health. They need to be removed anyway in order to do the waterproofing portion of the project, because you have to get underneath them. But we took note of what the problem is with putting trees on top of the garage. It's essentially a roof, this plaza, so it's a green roof. If you put green features on that, there's a lot more available in the marketplace now than there was in the 70s for green roof strategies with lightweight soil media and drainage layers that allow you to control the overflow of water when there's more water than the planter can handle. And there's also a lot more known about what's the right kind of plant to put on a roof structure. So next slide, please. And this is just a close-up of the sort of ongoing battle between walking surface and tree. All of this unevenness here is created by the surface roots of the honey locust tree. This is just another slide demonstrating how dark and kind of foreboding this back area is, even during the daytime. Next. So out of this process of looking through what, our fresh eyes, looking at what you all have been living with for years, and reading through the surveys, we came up with 12 goals of the redesign. And this is all pretty straightforward stuff, but it's good to state it, and we always are looking back at it and making sure that we're accomplishing what we set out. So replace the paving to eliminate trip hazards, but also reduce paving and increase planted areas as appropriate. One really good way to handle stormwater now is to actually use some of the planted areas to collect stormwater, reducing the amount of stormwater, reducing the amount that you contribute to the combined sewers. 3, provide a new landscaping treatment for all plazas with plants carefully selected for areas of full sun to partial shade as required by each location. Right now, you basically have trees and a few shrubs and whatever people plant on an annual basis. Our goal is to come up with a landscape that is year-round and and survives through all the seasons. Doesn't require replanting each year. Next slide. Create, as I mentioned before, landscape areas that are compatible with the garage roof waterproofing. 5, create a garden that continually changes in appearance with seasons, so that there is an ongoing interest and variability in the visual display. 6, select plants known for their resistance to drought and disease, resulting in gardens that are easier to maintain without need for extensive and wasteful irrigation systems or fertilizers or pesticides. This is a big part of our design. Judith will talk more specifically how you do that in a moment. Next, the gardens can also provide a positive habitat for beneficial flora like butterflies and songbirds, providing nectar for butterflies, seeds for birds, so that it will become a living landscape, not just a display of plants. Create landscapes that can have an educational impact and also be aesthetically enjoyable. The planting plans are being organized in such a way that we'll be able to identify what plants are planted in certain areas that create both an aesthetic effect, but also a way of understanding what you're looking at. 9, make all plazas universally accessible by installing fully current ADA compliant stairs and ramps, and all landscape pavement will be cast in place concrete, no pavers, no more uneven surfaces caused by small unit pavement. A very important thing that was not our idea, it was a task assigned to us, is to specify all materials and fixtures with consideration to cost, value, durability, and ease of maintenance. I think we've accomplished that. Some of the samples are over here. We can talk about those later. A very key feature of the new design is an attempt to improve security, eliminating those dark and hidden areas, creating more fenced-off areas that will provide greater access, control of access to areas at times as determined by the community. And the other opportunity, because of some of which we'll get into in a minute, was to expand the playground, provide additional equipment suitable for a wider range of ages, from toddler to 15 years old. So one other aspect of our study of the plaza was to do a sun angle study for the entire year. We ran animation, which actually was every day of the entire year. This is just a monthly summary of, I believe it's something like, I'm guessing it's around 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that, I can't remember. But in any case, this is a snapshot, same day or same span between it, like March 15th, 10 o'clock in the morning, April 15th, 10 o'clock in the morning, May, and so on. And what we were trying to get out of this is, what are the differences between the plazas in terms of the amount of sunlight over the course of the whole year? This would affect our choice of plants, it affects our choice of programming, what goes where, what will be suitable in certain areas over others. What we found was that for much of the growing season, the North Plaza had full sun, and that's part of the reason why these trees have done well. The South Plaza is shaded from the south and the west by these tall buildings, and is also probably contributing to the lack of growth of those trees over there. So they're not getting enough soil, enough water, or enough sun. And so this became an important first step to us to try to understand how we set up our rethinking of the plazas. So this is a plan of the new design, and the big decision that came out of the 12 goals and the sun studies and the plant health that has been observed, was that the right place to build a new garden for East Meadow Plaza was in the North Plaza for a couple of reasons. One, the sun. Two, it's on grade, it's on soil, it's not on a structure. And three, by making it a garden, we can remove probably about 75% of the pavement that is fighting and competing with the trees for air and water. So it's a win-win-win for those three aspects, and it creates. This is a honey locust tree, which has a very nice dappled sunlight effect, provides nice cooling shade, but it's not dark. And you've got a really great feature here in these existing trees. So we've done everything we can to ensure that they continue to do well. In the South Plaza, the challenge of dealing with a planting plan, a landscape plan that's appropriate on top of that structure, both from waterproofing standpoint, but also weight, and also dealing with the sun in being kind of cut off most of the afternoon by shading these buildings, from these buildings. So we determined that the right place to have the playground was the South Plaza. We can talk more about that when we zoom in on it. The Second Avenue Plaza is been slightly reconfigured to make it a more flexible space that can be somewhat more secure than what is now. The corner stairs have been replaced with planters. Planters are being designed so that there is no seat wall along the public sidewalk side to discourage a lot of collection of people sitting in that area. Right now, it's a bunch of walls and steps that are all conducive to people just sitting down and hanging out. Right now, what we're trying to do is to create a nice planted shady area that feels very much part of the East Midtown Plaza complex, not just the sidewalk leading into your property. The 24th Street right-of-way, what we wanted to do with this area is create a continuation of the design concepts and the others, so we developed this curvilinear shape in the paving pattern that is reflected in the planters of both gardens. We feel like this ties across this street closure, which, while the street closure is a very, very important part of the development of the complex all along, it has always felt like a line drawn in the sand between the two sides. So we want to draw a line across that street and really make it evident that these go together. We've also expanded the planted areas around these trees because, as you probably have noticed, the concrete is heaving up around the trunk flare of each of those trees. Trees are in pretty good shape. They're also on soil, not on a structure, not over a basement or a vault. But they would benefit from having a bigger planted area there. And then observing the pedestrian thoroughfare right-of-way that is required by the deed, we have placed a planter in this area for visual interest mostly, and to reduce the amount of concrete and the more sort of absorptive of heat that concrete can be. So this will have a sort of cooling effect in the area. The ramps, for the most part, in the existing changes and elevations are all being updated to current standards with handrails, and the slopes are being all confirmed for compliance. Within these plazas, there are some slight level changes. There's a new ramp being installed here to deal with this level change. In this area, which we'll see in a minute, there's two levels. It's not always apparent from there because most people probably don't want to go in the back. The back part is higher. That needs to be maintained because that's a structural change in elevation, and we're dealing with the ramps there. Next slide. So just to reinforce the point, there's the garden, our pedestrian street, the playground, and what is sometimes called the triangle. So we're going to zoom in on each now, just a little bit more closely. We'll have 3 slides of each. It starts with the setting out plan and the paving plan. This is the South Plaza. These shapes here are the planters. I'll do this instead. That's a planter. This is also a planter. These planters here are actually bridging over the change in grade between the upper level of the garage roof and the lower level of the garage roof. So it's sort of concealing that. We have small steps that allow for these little sort of peekaboo walkways here. This is a sloped walkway that makes up the change in elevation from the street level to the upper level of the back. This also change in level is being used to create two zones within the playground, and those are going to be they're going to separate age groups. The toddler age, 2 to 5-year-old play equipment and swing set is in this area, looking out over the area with the play equipment for 5 to 15. The planter here creates a low screen from the public area, and there's a fence at the top, which will show you a photograph of what that will look like in a moment. Seating is also along here, which you'll see in the next slide. This is a below planter. It is elevated above grade. It's not flush with the grade. And it's, we talked about that a moment ago. These planters are designed for appropriate depths, trying to keep sight lines clear through here so that parents can monitor, multi-age families can be monitored. With a small child from here, they can still see what's going on here, and also the security from out here looking all the way back through here. Next slide. Here's a different rendering of the same plan showing the playground equipment and the pattern of plants, which we'll go into later. Plants are being arranged in such a way to create colorful graphics that will be as interesting up close as possibly from an apartment in a tower. You can see here the play equipment we've drawn in with all the safety clearances called for by the manufacturer. These are made by the same company that makes the equipment that's out here, Compan. Next slide. And this is just a colored version of the same thing. One thing to note is that we are using several different kinds of concrete, decorative aggregate concrete in the plazas to distinguish the private property from standard Department of Transportation sidewalk, which in this rendering is represented here. This is the sidewalk along 24th Street. This big S that we were describing is going to be represented by a concrete with some silica carbide cast into it, so it has a slightly sparkly appearance to it, very smooth. And that will become the dividing line, in a sense, the new graphic representation of now you're on the East Midtown Plaza. The main plaza area is going to be a pigmented gray concrete with 3 different colored broadcast stone in it that then gets exposed by washing off the top layer of the cement all during the casting process. This will create almost a garden path feel to a large concrete area. It's much more interesting than plain room-swept concrete. And the last piece here, which doesn't look anything like this, it's over there, you'll see it's much more colorful, is just an accent concrete that will be used in special areas, both in the playground and in the garden. All the steps are being constructed out of solid granite. There's a sample of a granite tread right here for durability and long-lasting ease of maintenance. I think that's it for this. Sorry, one last thing. This speckly stuff here is representing the play safety surface, which is a recycled rubber tile. We have samples of that there too, and they're designed for the appropriate fall risk of the equipment that they're beneath. Next. And here's a rendering of this South Plaza looking up towards the North Plaza. So this right here is 24th Street right-of-way. This is the pedestrian right-of-way from 23rd. This is the planter outside the management offices, and you see there's a low wall. And we're also rimming that wall on both sides with some seating and waste cans and light bulbs. And here, this is the planter that I was referring to as creating some separation between the very public thoroughfare and the more semi-private play area. You can see the fence surrounding this, and there's a gate right here. The fence comes around this way. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the North Plaza. I'll be going into more details about some of the components, but just go through the overall arrangement of the plazas. So here's the new garden design, and there's a fence around this entire area. It's the first thing to note. We've removed all the brick pavers. These linear paths are cast-in-place concrete. There's a sort of a room in the middle of the garden with a larger area of concrete to stop and reflect. And then there's a curvilinear asphalt gravel path through here for a sort of more natural walk. This is all laid out in such a way to allow for a loop. So if you want to just have some light exercise, it's not a running path or anything like that. But it's all on one level and can be traversed, or you can sit at various points along the way. There's lots of benches. All the existing trees are preserved, and all these areas around the trees are planted with new plants, which goes to the next slide. This slide is maybe a little bit hard to read. This is from the planting plan that the contractors will use to arrange the plants. But there's a concept here of arranging the plants by species and by bloom time or growth, time of maximum growth into these squares, which are based on the Fibonacci series, which is part of our having a little bit of fun with creating scale, where in here you have a very intimate garden, which is right next to where there's some tables, fixed tables and seating for picnicking. And then as it spreads out to the more public areas, the areas get larger and the sort of display gets more dramatic. This is the Fibonacci series for those. I was wrong last night about describing it, so I've been corrected now. Fibonacci series is such that this is a graphic representation of the Fibonacci series, which is just a number series where you take 0, 1, and then the next number is the sum of the previous two numbers. So 0 plus 1 is 1 again, and then you move up, and 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, and so it creates this geometric progression of increasing size. So the widths of these in both directions are following that Fibonacci series. It's just a little bit of fun. It doesn't help the plants or anything. And here's a rendered plan of the area, so you can see the different kinds of materials again, and also the scoring pattern. All these lines on here will be saw-cut joints, so it'll be a very smooth surface, and the joints are sawn in to look like pavers, but they're really just providing crack